there's a team in the NFL, the Detroit Lions. They're getting a lot of hype right now, and they're expected to win the division and probably win a playoff game, maybe even get to the championship. I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit. I understand they're very good. They were good last year at the end, but are we overhyping the Lions right now?
Yes and no. I think they are overhyped, but I do think the NFC is so poor
Mm-hmm.
that they will have a good shot in the NFC. I don't think they're as good as everyone is saying. No. Again, they started 1-6 last year. Just like the end of the season wasn't a fluke, the beginning of the season wasn't a fluke either. And something interesting I heard about the Orioles, and I think actually the Lions head coach and players have said this themselves, that just because they won those games at the end of the year, you start 0-0. You have to prove it again. It's a new season. So do I think that this team is better than they were during that first 7-game stretch at the beginning of the year last year? Sure. I do think they're a very solid team. But at the same time, I also think that they don't have to be that great to make some noise. I think Minnesota's still solid. Minnesota's probably better than they were last year. And everyone's obsessed with Kirk Cousins now with after that new quarterback documentary came out. He looked great in that. I thought he came off really well. I'm not a Justin Fields believer, but some people are. And so some people think the Bears will take a step forward. The assumption is the Packers will take a step back with Jordan Love in his first year starter. But at the same time, the Packers weren't really that good last year. So again, you're looking at that division and look across the conference. How many quarterbacks do you love in the NFC? 2. I mean, there aren't. Dak Prescott is the second to best quarterback in the NFC, possibly behind Jalen Hurts. That's not, that just tells you everything you need to know about that conference. Brock Purdy might be the third best. So if you look at those 3 teams as the best 3 teams, right? Dallas, Philly, and San Francisco are the best 3 teams in the NFC, and like Seattle, the Giants. So would I be shocked if Detroit won the NFC because they had a fluke win against San Francisco and they had to beat Seattle and the Giants in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs? No, I wouldn't be shocked. That's not a crazy thing to think, but that doesn't mean they're that great of a team. So the answer is kind of complicated.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the AFC is so stacked and the NFC is just not the same. It is crazy because there's probably a lot of teams in the AFC that aren't very good, like Pittsburgh. I think they're going to take a step back this year, but they could probably easily make the playoffs in the NFC just because that division or just because the conference is just not where the AFC is at. And then you were mentioning like what happens if the Lions play the Niners and you said they have a fluke? What happens if they lose all 3 quarterbacks again? I mean,
Right.
it's just crazy to see. And I just think we're overhyping the Lions a little bit, but I do think the Vikings are kind of getting before the show quarterback came out. We were kind of sleeping on the Vikings just because we didn't think Kirk Cousins. I don't know if it was necessarily his fault that they lost that playoff game. The defense really wasn't there in that game, and I think Cousins played a all right game. I just think that do you think we're underrating the Vikings just because some people have a thing against Kirk Cousins?
You know, it's funny. Spike Eskin, our program director at WFN, always says we have to say definitive things. And I don't think I've said a single definitive thing yet. I told you I could see the Jets going either way. I told you I could see the Lions going either way. The same thing with the Vikings, though. Like, I want to make a definitive statement to tell you that, no, this team is actually really good, or no, this team's really bad. But here's the thing. The Vikings defense was awful. I hope it got better this year. I'm not sure what they did in the offseason. I don't follow the Vikings all that closely, but I'm sure that was their main focus was let's get this defense better. You have one of the best receivers in the league, obviously, in Justin Jefferson. They trust Alexander Madison to be their prime running back. And by the way, I don't think that's a terrible decision. Kirk Cousins, I think, is a good enough quarterback to win you regular season games, especially in a weaker conference. The thing is, they're not going to go 7-0 in one single score games again. That's where the people who are doubting them are right, because it's just not statistically going to happen again that every time you have a 1-score game, you win every single one of those. That's what happened last year. Every time they were in a close game, they won it. So that's not realistic to keep happening for them. Eventually that evens out where you're going to lose some of those games. Do I still think they're the best team in that division? I think so. I still think they're the team to beat. They won the division last year, where they won 13 games last year. They were a really good team last year. They're still, in my mind, the team to beat. They have the veteran quarterback who's been there a while. Not to sleep on Jared Goff. I do like Jared Goff a lot. I think he doesn't get enough credit. He had his best season without Sean McVay. Everyone talks about how much he was a product of McVay. Well, he goes to the Lions and he has the best year of his career without McVay. So I wouldn't sleep on him. But I think still, to be the best, you got to beat the best, right? And right now, the best in that division is still Minnesota, even if they take a slight step back.
Well, I mean, Minnesota did lose Dalvin Cook, which I was really shocked that they just out flat released him, even though Cook is still an elite running back, in my opinion. But they gained Jordan Addison, another really good receiver. So you add that, you have TJ Hawkinson still, who is probably somewhere in the top 10 with tight ends. I mean, they just have a lot of weapons, and I feel like they're about the same or similar team that they were last year.